Hello, everybody. Oh, that was so impressive. Carl was just playing the piano. That was amazing, everybody. That was amazing. He's the most talented piano player on either side of the Atlantic, in my opinion. I had a moment where I asked him one time to play a song, just a random one off the top of my head. He had a drink in one hand. He's like, oh yeah, and he started playing it with the other hand. And that is a true story. Hey, so this is a great day. I have obviously a few things I want to talk about. But before I do, I need to orient you where you all are. Many of you know this, but you are in the Haig room. The Haig room, everybody knows, most people know who Al Haig is, but Al Haig graduated in 1947. There's a few interesting things about Al Haig. He was the youngest four-star in the history of the United States Army. He was a four-star by 1973, which is obviously pretty quick. The room, if you go down the back hall, you can see a number of pictures from his life. There are some really funny ones, that interactions he had with Ronald Reagan, all the way from when he was a cadet till he was SAC here until he was working in the Nixon White House. The paintings behind you, those are originals by Thomas Sully, the famous early American artist. Those three paintings are the most valuable paintings in the entire inventory of the United States Army's museum collection. The most valuable is actually the one in the middle. That's a life of Thomas Jefferson. Obviously, apropos, that is in Jefferson Hall. There's only two paintings that are of Jefferson when he was alive, and this is one of them. And this was because the cadets paid for it. So he felt, this was at Monticello, and he decided to go ahead and do it. So I know there's been a lot of talk about the Roedys, and I'm going to spend some time talking about them also. But really, thank you all for being here. Thank you for coming to West Point. Tiger said this is our first time at West Point. Well, it's your first time? First time also? Welcome. I was getting ready to criticize their parenting. I was going to say, come on. So it's not every day you get to spend time at West Point, though. Mike pointed out the views are spectacular. I'm very biased, but I think this is the most gorgeous campus of any school in the country. Number 2 is in Laramie, Wyoming, which is snowed in currently. And I'm not showing that picture to my wife right now. It's snowed in. But how often do you get to spend time with a West Point graduate, a Vietnam vet, a internationally important figure, and a very good friend? I mean, this is a very, very, very special day. And I really think about this. I'm like, you think you'll see some of the pictures. There's been great work put on by Alex. I'm going to talk a bit about Alex. But, I've had one of my favorite things when I first got to know Bill is these stories. And I'd ask him, I'm like, who's the worst artist you ever worked with? I won't say it because I'm not sure I'm allowed to, but I'm like, that does sound bad. Oh. But he's worked with all types of the biggest names in music and industry and entertainment, Madonna, Bono, Beyonce, the Reeves. And 3 of those names are has-beens, but one is on the ascent. I won't tell you which one it is. Just the one with dashing good looks, good tone in the voice. Okay, I won't. I'm just kidding. It's not me, all right. So let me tell you this. But hanging out with the Roedys actually does make you feel like a star. It really, really does. And it's not because of who they know. It's not because of their various communities of people. It's how they treat you, right? And how they spend the time with you. And Bill and Alex are simply incredible people. And if you spent time, which I know all of you have, you know how much fun they are, but how authentic they are, and how much they care about all those that they consider their family, which is everybody in this room. I'd even throw in those cadets over there that showed up to eat. I bet you are now in their family community. So the first time I had a chance to meet Bill and Alex was at the Distinguished Graduate weekend, I guess. But I met him in the Soup's garden with Mike, and we had a blast right out the gate. And then he was willing to come and become one of my first fireside chats. I had this idea where I thought, hey, there's all these interesting people come to West Point. Cadets should hear these individuals come talk. And I didn't know if it was going to be a good or bad idea. Bill was one of the very first, and I was like, this is so easy. This guy's fascinating. I just asked him, like, what about this? What about this? And the cadets loved it, and I was like, we were off and running. And it was so much fun. I'll tell you, when I think about it, if you all remember the old commercial, the Dos Equis, is it Dos Equis? Dos Equis, right? Most interesting man alive. That's actually Bill Roedy. Bill is unbelievably interesting, and in lots and lots of different ways. Any topic you want to talk about, he knows something about it, has an opinion. I'm like, that's pretty good. He knows everybody, right? But he also has a superpower, and I don't dismiss this one. So when you talk to him, he actually is listening to you. He'll sit there and listen. He'll make eye contact, listen to what you're saying, and be like, huh, and he'll have a thoughtful response. A lot of people don't do that. Most people have something like in the back of their head. They're thinking, I got to do this, got to do that, I got to answer my phone. He will sit down and talk and spend time with you, which is really, really, really incredible. You've heard and you've read about all the various initiatives that Bill's worked on over these years. All of those from obviously his time in the Army, to HBO, to MTV, to media, to global AIDS pandemic. But really, it's been just a huge honor for Kimberly and me to be able to spend time with Bill and Alex over these last years. True privilege. They are some of our dearest friends, and we are so honored and truly humbled that they have chosen to do what they did today in the museum, in the library. Because Bill said it, the United States Military Academy is worth the protection and the investment, and it's needed. He laid it out in a nice way about how the academy needs to be protected. Sometimes it's lost on people. They think the academy will just endure, that West Point will be just fine. That actually is true. It will endure, but if you want it to be excellent and you want it to be the premier leadership institution in the world, which it is, it takes serious effort, protection, and proactivity, and Bill and Alex are perhaps some of the very best at that. Not just in terms of a gift, but also in terms of the effort he makes on behalf of the academy, talking about it, evangelizing, tapping others to help them understand what is going on. How they've given back to the institution is not simply in some temporal way or in some financial way, but they've really poured themselves into West Point, and it is very, very much worth it. And so that generosity clearly is going to have a lasting contribution to West Point. Very fitting we picked here, right, in Jefferson Hall. And I don't have to explain why again, but it's really at the heart where the Roedy Rotunda will be forever, is at the heart of Jefferson Hall, which is very near and dear to my heart because it's the beating heart of the academic program where this is at, all right, where the cadets come and go. So the space represents something very, very important. It is where the cadets spend long hours reading, thinking, and preparing. You may have seen it as the ceremony was going on. The tempo of West Point doesn't stop. There were cadets walking around, they'd come up and be like, can I go there? And you'd be like, come on, let's go. And they'd walk around, and they were trying with their backpacks to get into study and to read. And I think that energy doesn't go away. And if you know about, particularly Alex, she likes the energy, right? And the excitement, this is the place, right? This is the place to do it. But it's really where we develop the intellectual habits that are going to shape how these cadets are going to lead. And nothing is perhaps more important in today's environment than having cadets who know how to think versus trying to be robotic in how they think. That is our great advantage, and that happens because of so much work that happens here in the library. West Point is often associated with physical rigor. I think that's fair. You'll see it. There's cadets always running around doing something. And we also focus on leadership under pressure. That is a really big part of the experience. I say this, every cadet has kryptonite here. There's going to be something they're not good at. There's something that's meant to challenge them. There's something to teach them resilience. But really, one of the things I would highlight is the profession of arms, maybe more so now than ever, requires leaders who can think clearly in complex environments. Those who can weigh competing demands and who can make decisions when there are real consequences to be had. And I say this because the intellectual aspect of the officer is more important than ever when you start to look at the contemporary environment. It's so complicated, it's so complex, it's so ambiguous. The space domain, I was just having a conversation this morning about the space domain. The largest consumer of space assets in the entire United States and in the entire Department of Defense is the United States Army, right? West Point will be very soon producing Army space officers, right? That's just one of many components, but there's such a technical component, there's such an aspect to the officer expectations for officers today that the intellectual development matters more than maybe ever. And as I like to quote, and I'll paraphrase him, one of my favorite books I ever read was called A Passion for Leadership by Robert Gates. And Robert Gates has two great quotes. One is from Mark Beeger, where Robert Gates said, when he was the president of Texas A&M, he said, when I was the president of Texas A&M, the students would just complain about every single tradition, the bonfire and the football games and the core yell and all that. But magically, when they graduate, every tradition is sacrosanct. Nothing can ever change again. I'm like, oh my gosh, that is everybody here, right? But the second one, he said, is we're 100% accurate and being inaccurate in predicting the next war, right? We know that we're not going to be able to do that. And there's a lot of narrative that West Point's backwards looking, or it's tradition laden, or it's calcified, or it's in an atmosphere of stasis, and that we're always fighting the last war. That's completely incorrect. That is an incorrect statement. We are very, very much focusing on the fight today and in the future. In fact, I would argue that West Point's leading in this space. And so much of that is driven by the intellectual development of our cadets in the academic program. And today the Roedys have just accelerated those efforts on a way that's hard to describe. But I do want to take a moment to reflect on something a little bit deeper, which is a lifelong connection to service. So as you heard, Bill's story starts, I'll say, with graduation from West Point in the class of 1970, and I'll skip a lot of it because you all have lived it. You have lived life experience, many of you, and you've heard it. But what I'm going to read you is straight out of his yearbook entry in the class of 70 yearbook. I love this. This is a quote. Why was he always the last one to get there? Did he really get his uniforms at the Goodwill store? Why did he always look so casual in everybody's snapshots? Why did he read the newspaper more than the school books? Where did he get those thighs like tree trunks? Tree trunks, great. This is my favorite. And his rock Hudson hair. Maybe we'll never know. Maybe that's the way he wants it. I think that pretty much sums up Bill Roedy, everybody, right there. Does it, right there. It does it right there. So after he graduates, as you all know, becomes an Army officer, and as so many of you did, he immediately went to Ranger School and then headed right to Vietnam, where he led soldiers in combat, and then later commanded those nuclear missile sites in Europe during the Cold War that he discussed earlier. In other words, he began his career operating at the very center of American hard power, is the way I would describe it, in a really, really tumultuous time in our country, socially and politically. But what makes his story particularly compelling, at least in my opinion, is what comes next, because he didn't really leave that mission behind, and he said it in his extremely eloquent speech this morning, that he traded in some of these things, but kept in his mind this same type of mentality about projecting power on behalf of his nation. Because he may have left the missiles behind, but he adapted. And when you really step back and you look at what he did, you see it's not a series of unrelated chapters. It is a continuum of service through his entire life. I say this often. I say it to cadets. I say it to young officers. I say it to my son who's a grad. I said, hey, when you're a West Pointer, there's going to be, the country didn't just throw all these awesome opportunities at you for nothing, right? You were expected to lead and serve forever. Forever. It doesn't stop. And I hear officers say, well, I'm going to get out of the Army. I'm like, yeah, then you'll be running your town T-ball league. Like, you're going to lead, and you're obligated to lead. It's who we are. And I think Bill is a perfect exemplar of what we mean about a continuum of service for a lifetime of service to the nation. After leaving the Army, you all know he built MTV International into a global media network that reached across continents and cultures and political boundaries. And at critical moments in history, that mattered. Like, that really, really mattered. Because as the Cold War began to wind down, something else was happening alongside traditional diplomacy and deterrence. That was information started to move, right? The power of information. We've always hear about that. We understand the power of information, but it was actually demonstrated because information was moving, the culture was moving, ideas were moving, and MTV Europe became a part of that movement. That was a big deal, right? Not simply as a business, but if you hear Bill talk about it, he was thinking about, how can we actually help win the Cold War? And if you don't think that American culture had a huge part in that, you just have to go and watch the first time there were some big concerts that were allowed on the other side of the Iron Curtain. And you saw young people starting to descend in Moscow in the hundreds of thousands. And then you knew, they're in trouble, right? Communism always loses, but they were in trouble. Because he brought Western music, language, and culture into places that had long been isolated, that were dying for the creative spark, the American exceptionalism, if you want to call it that. He connected young people across borders who had previously had little exposure to one another. And in Eastern Europe and the former Soviet bloc, access to satellite television, that became the key. I think that was the key that unlocked it. And to channels, particularly like MTV, offered a glimpse of a different way of life, that things can be better. Hey, oh my gosh, it looks awesome to be an American. Oh my gosh, that looks awesome to be in Western Europe. I want to be part of that. And that came directly from efforts by Bill Roedy and his team. At one time, after meeting with Bill, Mikhail Gorbachev reportedly told him, music is more powerful than missiles. That maybe could be an overstatement depending on where you're at and what time in your life, but I think it's accurate, right? Culture wins, and always has been a fierce proponent of American culture. Because Bill represents the reality that influence does not come from one source alone. Our nation's influence comes from a combination of hard power. Talk about Haig, you can see up here, these are actually missiles that are lining the top of the Haig room. But it's also the ideas we represent, the connections we make to other nations and other people's similar interests. And I think more than anything, it's what Bill Roedy reminds me of is American optimism, right? American optimism always wins, always wins. You start to ask questions like, how are we going to solve this? How are we going to solve this? Like, I don't know, we'll figure it out. We're Americans, we'll do that, right? I mean, I know that. That's one of our greatest strengths is that we are not concerned with the challenges or the problems or the historic and traditional legacy issues between groups or people or countries. American optimism, best reflected by Bill Roedy. And exactly how he talks today, how he spends time with you. You talk to him, he's an optimistic person. The sun is always shining, right? And so Bill went from commanding nuclear weapons aimed at the Warsaw Pact to later broadcasting into those very regions, reaching them with a force I don't think they understood or expected, but was culture, information, American exceptionalism, American optimism, and in details that say a lot about him. He knew that he was having an impact, but doing it in such a way that it was subtle, it was kind, it was nice, but he still kept a 3.5-ton piece of the Berlin Wall at his house in London to show he won, right? And so what I would tell you is that this is a reminder that even the most entrenched divisions can eventually give way, and that sometimes the forces that shape history are not only military or political, but cultural as well. Like culture is so important, and we oftentimes forget that. Because Bill didn't just use his platform with MTV to help defeat the Soviets, he also used it to save lives, right? He was able to turn it in another direction. Through MTV, Bill helped lead global efforts to combat HIV/AIDS, serving as a global health ambassador with the United Nations AIDS program and working with organizations to raise awareness at scale few others could. Again, understanding the power of information and how to leverage that. Now, to fully appreciate Bill's story, you do have to look back one generation, and Bill talked about his dad. But Bill's commitment to service did not begin with him, like any continuum of service. And one of the things I truly love about the Roedy Rotunda, it's really meant for cadets to see what a lifetime of service and a family of service looks like. It goes across generations. His father, Colonel William Harvey Roedy, a graduate of the class of 1940 and a veteran of those three wars that Bill mentioned, was also, again, at Pearl Harbor on that December 7, 1941. And there is a moment from that day that stays with you, right? As that attack unfolded, his wife asked him why he was calmly shaving, and his answer was simple. He just knew he was going to be gone for a long time. It was time to go serve. That sense of duty, that clarity of purpose, is something that defines the Roedy family, and again, it defines the entire institution, right? The entire institution, and clearly shapes why we're honoring them today, but they're honoring us by helping our cadets, our faculty, and all those that will come through here reflect on what it means to have a continuum of service and a real emphasis on that duty that defines who we are. So that brings me to Alex. Because Bill's story is obviously remarkable, and you know it doesn't happen alone. So when Kimberly and I had an opportunity to go and visit with Bill and Alex in London, it was spectacular. It was so awesome. We had such a great time. Couldn't be a better host in the world. But the thing that I loved was during one point in the visit, she brought out a whiteboard. Like she's like, literally a whiteboard. It's like, here's everything you need to do in London. I'm like, I think that's impossible. She's like, it's not impossible. You can do this. I'm like, all right, here we go. And she had every detailed plan, the timeline planned out. Everything was set to go, and we executed it to perfection. It was organized, it was deliberate, it was exceptionally well executed. I've spent a career in the military witnessing different ways of planning and logistics, and I can say without hesitation they all pale in comparison to Alex Roedy, as I can tell you. Best I've ever seen. By the way, I mean, only half joking that if I was ever to go to war again, or I don't know, just need a vacation, I'm like, Alex, you planned the whole thing for me? Like, by the way, she's not just an incredible host, incredible mom, right? She was so incredible, in fact, my 2 daughters were able to visit with us, and I don't think they were joking. They asked if they could be emancipated from us to go live with the Roedys. I almost took them up on it based on my conversation with one last weekend, just so you know. So what I just want to close with is that what really is important is that we reflect on those things that are important. And I think what you find about the Roedys and their commitment to the Academy is that I'll get that for you, don't worry. That's okay. That's the LA in you right there. What is that, a spinner?
No, it's one of those things for lip balm. Everyone gave it out.
Everybody's got a lip balm? See, 2 things I don't get. I always have to work at these things. I don't get the cocktail of the day, drink, and I don't get the lip balm. Ridiculous. But I would just ask us all to reflect on the moment, reflect on what they've done for the Academy. It's a great reflection on the class of 70. It really is. I know that talking to Bill and Alex, multiple times they've been very like, hey, we're not sure how we want this to be displayed, how we want it. I can state it unequivocally. He wanted to really be about the class and the Academy. And that's those qualities, that selflessness, that humbleness, that continuum of service, those virtues that we expect from our cadets, including the ability to use information, the ability to be adaptable, the ability to change, all of that is really demonstrated in what the Roedys have done today. So the Roedy Rotunda will now become a part of the daily experience of cadets. Those cadets who study here, think here, and prepare themselves for a lifetime of service. I like how it's the rotunda where it sits is where there's all this energy, but there's also a couple of other parts to the rotunda on the sides where there's reflection allowed. You can go over and see all the existing howitzers, and you can pull up the various classes, but you also have the ring display. Just a little walk around the corner, and the ring display is perhaps one of the most powerful things at West Point. The class ring started at West Point, as most of you know, and there has been a continuous dedication of rings over the years from those who've given the ultimate sacrifice to those that have dedicated on behalf of their family, and those rings are the best reflection of the long gray line, I think, at West Point, outside of when Colm Hall opens again on May 15th. And I love how the Roedy Rotunda is sitting at the point where you can look on the past of the Corps, looking through the howitzers. You can see the connection to the long gray line, but you also see the vibrance and energy that is West Point as we develop our cadets. And so this is going to be something that will define the Roedy family for generations, but it's also going to continuously reflect so well in the class of 70, and of course on all the graduates of West Point. So Bill and Alex, thank you. Thank you for the generosity, the faith, the trust, the belief in the Academy to steward something of this significance. We will always honor it, but know that every single day as cadets walk by, they're going to think about it, and they're going to see it, and they're going to know it's important. And I really would say, more personally, obviously, thank you as such wonderful friends. The Reeves truly, truly love you all. But I would actually thank you for your continued belief in the United States Military Academy. Like the belief in West Point is the indispensable institution in this United States of America. If West Point fails, the Army will fail, and if the Army fails, then I'm scared to think what will happen. So West Point won't fail. It never will fail, and it won't fail because of patriots and selfless people like the Roedys. So we are so thankful, and it's only fitting that your name is now part of the very fabric and foundation of West Point. So thank you all, and please give them a round of applause.